Welcome to Flutter Teacher. In this session, we will talk about most important and interesting concept in the Dart, and that is nothing but the interface. Here, I'm not going to talk about different questions and answers related to interface. In fact, I want to cover them separately in the next video. Then look at a topic that we'll cover in this video. We'll start from what is interface. Then we will understand what do you mean by implicit and explicit interface. Then we'll cover various features of interface. Here I will talk about 9 different features of interface that I have come across. And at the end of this video, I will talk about the practical use of interface. So without wasting time, let's get started. Let's start from the first topic. What is an interface? Do you know there is no keyword called interface in Dart, and there is no special or dedicated way to create interface in the Dart. In fact, a class definition acts as the implicit interface. Now let me tell you what is interface in programming point of view. Interface enforces a contract that class must fulfill using the implements keyword. In simple words, we can say interface gives specification and class provides implementation. That's the reason in order to use a class as the interface, we have to use the keyword given by the Dart, and that is called implements. Let me explain this one with the practical example. We have a class called A and that contains a field called data with value 10. We have two methods, show data and the method called void test. We have a class B. Right now class B and class A, they are the independent classes. And if I write with say class B, say extends A, so it means here I want to use class A as a superclass and B as a class B. So I want to use class A as a class A here. So what is happening here? All the members of class A now becomes a class B member, means it will be inherited inside class B. So the definition of this data and the complete definition of show data and test will be available inside class B. So that we call it as the inheritance, and here I want to use class A as the class A itself. Now let me remove this extends and I want to write here implements. When we write class B implements A, it means I don't want to use this class A as the superclass for class B. In fact, I want to use this class A as the interface. Right now we have seen that each and every class in Dart, whether it's abstract class or concrete class, that class by default acts as the interface in the Dart. It means if we want to use a class as a superclass, we have to use extend, and whenever we want to use a class to work as the interface, so instead of using extend, we simply have to go with the keyword called implements. So it means class B will now implement interface A. So whenever we are saying that class A is not a class, means it's an interface. So what is happening here? All the instance members of this interface, now it has to be overridden by the class B. Means whichever class that implements interface, it's a responsibility of that class. It has to override all the instance members of the interface. Means now the class B has to just override this variable called data, or it has to provide the getter or setter for this data. Even it has to override the show data and test method inside the class B. This is because when we write implements A or implements some interface, so instead of getting entire definition of method inside the class, it will only get the method signature. Frankly speaking, it will get the abstract method signature inside class B. And that's the reason this class B has to override all the instance members of interface. Just look at the errors that we have got. It is saying that missing concrete implementations of a.showData, a.test, getter a.data, and the setter a.data. So as I'm not overriding this variable, so it's compulsory for me that I should provide getter or setter. But if I override that one, so let me copy from here and let me paste it here. You can observe here now the error message has just changed, and it is showing that missing concrete implementation for a.showData and a.test. It means inside class B, it's compulsory for me to override the method show data and test. So let me copy from here and let me paste it here. Now you can observe I don't have any error right now. I just have a warning, and this is because whenever we override something inside a subclass, so we should use the annotation called @override. So let me write that one here. So we write @override. Let me copy this one and paste it for the remaining things, that is for the show data and for the method called test. and that's fine. Let me format my code well. Let me change the message inside the show data and the test. So I can write here show data of B class and the test of B class. Now, I hope it's clear for you guys. Whenever we use implements for the class, means whenever we use implements. So here the class that we implement doesn't act as a class. In fact, it acts as the interface. Whether it's a abstract class or it's a concrete class doesn't matter. So whatever method it has, means whether it has abstract method or non-abstract method, it's compulsory for implementing class to override it, to redefine all the methods present inside the interface. That's why I said that interface just provides the specification and class has to provide implementation for all the specification given inside interface. And you can observe here this implements is a nice and it's really a beautiful keyword that gives you the complete meaning of what the interface is. And as a technically means for the technical aspect we can say it is now means class A is acting as a contract. So B is saying that yes, I will take a contract with you, and it's my challenge, or it's a challenge to me to override or to just to redefine all the methods present inside you. Now let's talk about what do you mean by implicit and explicit interface in the Dart. Right now we have seen that each and every class in Dart, whether it's abstract class or concrete class, will act as the by default interface in Dart. So you can observe here we have a class A that contains method test and do something. So when I use class C implement say, it means for this class C, A is not a superclass. In fact, I want to use this A as the interface. So this type of class that contains methods and all this thing will act as the implicit interface. And most of people ask me a doubt that can we create explicit interface in Dart? I should say practically it's not possible. Means we cannot have actual concept called explicit interface. This question is mostly been asked by the people who came from Java or C# background. If we if we have some Java experience, in Java it's possible to define explicit interface. Means we can create the actual interface, which is actually a collection of constants and abstract methods. So in that we don't have exact same way, means we don't have exact way for creating that interface, because we can't create actually an interface, but we can mimic or we can create something like that by using the abstract class, and that is also known as the explicit interface in the Dart. But I'm saying it's not actually explicit interface, it is a way that allows us to mimic or just to make a concept like that. You can observe here I have the abstract class B here. Then inside this class B, we have the method test and do something. You can observe here this class has got the abstract methods. They are not the concrete method. If I put some constant here, let's say static const and say some data, let's say data is equals to 10. So now you can observe here this class B, let me write here implements B. Now in this case we can say the class B or abstract class B is looking exactly similar to the interface that is available inside the C# and Java. So it is just a collection of constants and abstract method, but make sure that there is no actual concept that allows us to create the explicit interface. Now let's talk about different features of interface in the Dart. Here I will talk about 9 different features that I have came across as per my experience. And believe me guys, these 9 features will definitely help you guys to understand interface in a better way. So let me start from the first one. Multiple interfaces can be implemented. If you have watched my video regarding inheritance, there we have seen a subclass cannot inherit or extend more than one superclasses. But if we have the interface, then it's possible for any class to implement more than one interfaces. We have a class A here that contains test method. Then we have class B that contains method called demo. And we have class C here which is implementing the interface A and interface B. It's possible. And to implement multiple interfaces, just write the name of first interface, then put the comma and just apply the name of another interface, and so on. We can implement multiple interfaces. Now, you might have a big question, means how it's possible technically to inherit or to implement multiple interfaces. What about when we have the same name methods in the class A and inside the class B? So don't worry guys, I will talk about all the questions and doubt in the next video where I will talk about different questions related to interface. For the class C, it's also possible that class C can extend any other class, and along with extending a class, it can also implement interface A and B. The second feature is implementing class must override instance members of interface. You can observe here we have a class A that contains integer x and the method void test. And inside the class B, I simply want to implement A, means I want to use class A as interface. And as a rule, it's compulsory for the class B to override this member, that is integer x, or at least it has to provide getter and setter. And it's compulsory for the class B to have the overridden method test inside it. Otherwise, we'll have error in class B. You can observe here we are getting error because we have not overridden the variable x and the method test inside the class B. Third point says static members of interface need not to be overridden by the class that implements interface. You can observe here we have a class A that contains a static variable having name count, and there is a static method called showData. Inside class B, I have used implements A. It means I want to use this class A as the interface for B. But you can observe here there is no error or there is no warning for me because I just have used this implement. But as this count and show data they are static, it's not compulsory for B. Means there is no need inside a class B to override that one. This is because they are the static one, and as we know that the static members are not the part of state of an object. Means they are not the instance member, they are just the class members, and they are a part of class, they are not actually a part of object. Fourth point is very important. It says constructor has no role while implementing interface. If you have observed my sessions regarding the interface and the constructors in the interface, there you might have observed one thing. Whenever we create object of subclass, before calling the constructor of subclass, by default, the default constructor of superclass gets called, and that is what the case in case of inheritance. But whenever we use the interface, this is not going to happen. Just try to understand this example here. We have a class A that contains two constructor, the default one, and this is the constructor having the name called a dot sum name. We have a class B and that extends A. Okay, intentionally I have placed extend, otherwise you might say that why I'm using extend here. Then we have default constructor of class B having a simple message here. Inside the main, we have the object of B just created. Then when we run this program, you can observe here, as we have extend, before calling the constructor of B, the constructor of A, that is default constructor, get called, then the default constructor of B is called. Then I can simply put here, say, colon, I can write colon super, and I can write super dot sum name. That's fine. Let me rerun this program here. You can observe here, just before calling the constructor of B, the constructor of A dot sum name get called, and then the constructor of B is called here. What is the super and what is the use of this one? If you don't know, just go ahead and watch the video regarding super. Link is also there in description. Now guys, this is the case when I'm using extend here. But instead of extend, let's say if I use implements, and now let me remove this super dot sum name from here, and let me run this program, and you will observe the magic here. Just, just before calling the constructor of B, nothing is getting called. Simply the constructor of B is called. You can observe here, constructor of A is never called here. This is because A is not a superclass. A is just the interface. Now you might have question, can I write say colon and super something? Yes, we can write here. But in this case, it's my guarantee that it's not a constructor of A, it's actually the constructor of object class which is getting called. So that's why I have written this application. But you can observe here, it is just showing output B constructor called, not the constructor of A called. And if I try to write, let's say super dot sum name, so let me write here super dot sum name, immediately I will get error because no such a constructor is available. It is showing error that the class object does not have a constructor named as say sum name. Lots of people ask me a question, why it's saying error class object? Okay, what is the means what is the significance of class object is here? Why class object is coming in here? So reason here is we know that whenever there is no super class for any class, we can observe here for class B we don't have return extend something. So whenever class don't have extend some other class, object class will act as by default super class for that one, and that is the reason that is trying to find the constructor called some name inside the class called objects, and that's the reason this object class is coming in a picture for this error. Point number 5 is again very important. It says class must override setters and getters of an interface. You can observe here I have a class A that I want to use as an interface, and there is a variable called underscore x with value 10. Then we have setter and getter for the variable x. Then there is a simple method called void test. We have a class B that implements A. It means I want to use A as interface for this class B. You can observe here it is giving me an error that it is missing the concrete implementation for this test underscore A setter and getter. So if I just copy this X here, so let me copy this X from here, and sorry, let me copy or paste it inside the class. And if I just copied the definition of method and paste it here, let me format the code. But still you will observe that I'm getting error that there is no overdone for, done for this getter and setter. So it's clear that when a class contains getter and setter, means when interface contains getters and setters, it's compulsory for implementing class to just override that getter and setter. Means even if you just override that particular variable, it doesn't matter. You strictly have to follow the rules and regulations given by the Dart. You have to just override getters and setters. Point number 6 says members of interface can't be accessed using super in the class. You can observe here we have class A that contains method called void test. Then we have class B which is implementing the class A. It means I want to use this class A as interface, and simply I have just overwritten the method test as a rule. I have to do this inside class B. Then I have simply called the method test just over the object of B. Now, if I use extend here, I hope you understood what I mean by extend. If I use extend here, then this inside a method test, I can simply write super.test. If I try to write, let's say super.test here. So what do you mean by super.test? Here, I just want to call the method test, which is coming from the super class. But you can observe here, as I have written implements, means I want to use this class A as an interface. So I am not allowed to write super.test. Means using super keyword, I cannot access members of interface inside the implementing class. But if I change this implements from extends, let's say right here extends, then it's fine here. You can observe error has resolved here and Dart is allowing me to just use super.test. So I hope it's clear for you. Whenever we have super class, means when we use extend here, it's possible to access members of super class inside the subclass using super. But if we have implements, let me change it to implements. Whenever we have implements, so it's not allowed us to access the members of interface inside the implementing class using the super keyword. Point number 7 says both concrete and abstract class can be used as interface. Yes, it's possible. We can use the normal, that is the concrete class as interface, and we can also use abstract class to create an interface. Moreover, if you want to have a feeling like creating the explicit interface that you might have seen in C# and Java, so we can use abstract class for that purpose. We can simply put constant whatever you want, and you can just go on putting your abstract method. That's completely fine. Point number 8 says abstract class has no restriction on overriding members of interface. You can observe here we have a class A that contains method void test, and inside this class B I have written implements A. It means A is acting as interface, and as B is a concrete class, I'm having error because I just have to implement all the method, that is I just have to override method test inside the class B. But if I change this class B from the concrete class to abstract, so let me write here a keyword called abstract. So as soon as I place the keyword abstract, you can observe here error has removed from my code. This is just because we have seen that whenever we write implements A, instead of getting complete definition of the class A, we will get only the abstract signature of method, and that's what placed inside the class B. And as class B is itself the abstract class, so there is no problem of having the abstract signature of method inside the abstract class. But when we have a concrete class, it's not allowed to have abstract signature of method inside a concrete class. It has to be present in only inside abstract class, but not inside the concrete class. Point number 9 says interface itself can extend a class or implements another interface. We have a class A that contains a concrete method called showData. Then we have class B which is extending a class A. You can observe here for class C I have used implements B, means for this class C B is the interface and this interface B is extending a class A. So it means this interface can extend the class. Moreover, it's possible that I can use say class B implements A, and obviously inside this class B it's compulsory that there must be a method. So it's also possible that the B can implement another interface or B can extend the class, and I can simply implement the interface that can extend another class or it can implement the interfaces. Now let me explain the most important topic in this video, and that is the practical use of interface. We have seen that interface enforce a contract that class has to fulfill using the implements keyword, and we also seen that interface gives specification and class has to provide implementation for those specification. So we can make use of interface in two different situations. Consider we have a class and we want that all the methods of a specific class must be overridden by that class. Let's say we have a class A that contains some method, and we want to force a class B that it must override all the methods of class A. So in this case, we can ask a class B to use class A as interface. So instead of using extend, we can ask that class to implement, so that for that class B, it's compulsory to override all the methods or all instance members present in class A. You might have doubt it's also possible using the abstract class, then why someone should use interface? In abstract class, we can have the abstract method. But consider inside a class, you want to have a concrete method, but along with that concrete method, you want to force your subclass to override the method. Means you want your subclass to have its own version. Means superclass will have its own version and subclass must have its own version. So in this scenario, you will find the great use of interface. Now let me talk about the second use of interface. Consider we have some class, and inside that class you want to force say methods of multiple classes to be overridden. Okay, consider we have a class C, and inside this class C you want to force a class C that it must have to just override the methods of class A as well as class B. So if we just make class A and class B as abstract, so it's not going to work because we cannot extend more than one classes. But we can implement multiple interfaces. So for class C, we can ask class C that it has to implement class A and class B. So this is how we can force any class to implement multiple methods present in the different classes. Let me explain that one with one example program. We have two different abstract classes called area and perimeter, and here I simply want to use this abstract class as interface. That's why I have just defined this void area method as the abstract method inside the class or interface called area. Then we have a method called perimeter inside the interface called perimeter. We have a class called rectangle. You can also hear inside this class rectangle I use implements area and perimeter. It means for this class rectangle I want to force that it must override all the methods present in class area and from the class perimeter. So this is what we can achieve using interface, but we cannot achieve using the concept called extends. So that's really a beauty of implements here. So I have just created length and breadth variable. Then I have defined a constructor that accepts the value of length and breadth. And I have simply just overridden area method that prints area of rectangle. Then we have a method called perimeter, which simply prints the perimeter of rectangle. Inside main, I have created object of rectangle, and I have simply called area and perimeter over that rectangle object. When I run this program on console, you will get the area of rectangle and perimeter for that given value 10 and 20 for the length and breadth. That's it for this video. See you guys in the next video. There might be lots of questions, doubts and difficulties regarding interface in the Dart. Don't worry, I will talk about all the doubts and difficulties in the next video. If you really found this video helpful and knowledgeable, then don't forget to like, share, subscribe and hit the bell notification button to get my latest videos.